My name is Jessica Mitchell, and I am 28 years old. I built a $1 million security company from my garage after serving 2 tours in Afghanistan, while my family called me reckless and irresponsible. Today, just hours after I wired $50,000 to save my father's business, he texted me something that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. But what happened in the next 60 minutes proved that sometimes the cruelest betrayals lead to the most incredible breakthroughs. 3 years of PTSD, family rejection, and financial sacrifice led to this moment when my phone buzzed twice within an hour. The first message destroyed me. The second one changed my life forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday in Des Moines, Iowa. I was in my home office by 6 a.m. reviewing security contracts for Mitchell Security Solutions, the company I'd built from nothing after returning from my second deployment in Afghanistan. The coffee was strong, the Iowa sunrise was painting my office walls golden, and for once I felt like everything in my life was finally clicking into place. At 7:30 a.m., my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen, which was unusual. Robert Mitchell wasn't much of a morning caller, especially not to me. In our family, important calls went to my older brother Ryan first. I was always the afterthought, the backup plan, the daughter who'd gone off and played soldier instead of settling down like a proper woman should. Jess, Dad's voice was strained, tired. I need to ask you something, and I know it's not fair. My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with those words from my father. The hardware store. He referred to Mitchell's Tools and Hardware, the family business he'd run for 30 years. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. The bank's calling in the loan tomorrow, and I'm $50,000 short. $50,000. The number hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. I knew Dad had been struggling since the big box stores moved into Cedar Falls, our hometown, but I had no idea it was this bad. "What about Ryan?" I asked, automatically, knowing the answer before the words left my mouth. Ryan was the golden child, the son who'd stayed home, married his high school sweetheart, and was supposed to help Dad run the business. He was also a gambling addict who'd blown through his inheritance, his wife's savings, and every opportunity Dad had given him. "Ryan can't help right now," he said carefully. "His situation is complicated." Complicated was family code for Ryan screwed up again, but we're going to pretend it's not his fault. I stared at my computer screen where a contract for a $2.3 million government security deal sat waiting for my final review. The biggest contract Mitchell Security Solutions had ever landed. The validation I'd been working toward for 3 years, the proof that the daughter everyone had written off had actually built something meaningful. "Dad, I'm not liquid for that kind of money right now," I said, which wasn't entirely true. I had the money, barely, but it would wipe out my business reserves and personal savings. Everything I'd built would be one bad month away from collapse. "I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn," he said, and I could hear the desperation he was trying to hide. "Jess, you've always been the strong one, the responsible one. I know I haven't been the father you deserved, but I'm asking now, please, the strong one, the responsible one. Not the successful one, not the accomplished one, not the daughter who'd earned a Bronze Star for valor in Afghanistan or built a company from nothing, just the one who could be counted on to clean up everyone else's messes." But he was still my father. And despite everything, despite years of being second best to Ryan, despite the dismissive comments about my little security business, despite the way he'd reacted when I'd enlisted in the Army at 19, what kind of future is that for a girl? I couldn't let him lose everything. "I'll wire the money this morning," I said quietly. The relief in his voice was palpable. "Jess, I don't know how to thank you. This saves everything. I'll pay you back as soon as I—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't make promises we both know you can't keep. Just don't lose the store, okay?" After hanging up, I sat in my office chair for 10 minutes, staring at the sunrise and trying to process what I'd just committed to. $50,000. My entire safety net gone. 3 years of careful saving, strategic reinvestment, and financial discipline wiped out with one wire transfer. But it was family,
And despite how they treated me, despite feeling like an outsider in my own home for most of my life, I couldn't watch Dad lose the business that had been his whole identity for 3 decades. I called my business partner, Derek Santos, my old Army buddy who'd helped me build Mitchell Security Solutions from the ground up. Derek had saved my life in Kandahar province, and I'd returned the favor in Helmand. We'd been through everything together.
You're doing what? Derek's voice crackled through the phone from his home in Denver, where he managed our Western operations. It's my father, Derek. I can't let him lose everything. Jess, that's our entire reserve fund, plus your personal savings. If this government contract falls through, if we have any major expenses in the next 6 months, I know the risks, I said, pulling up my banking app, but it's family. Your family hasn't exactly been there for you, Derek pointed out, not unkindly. He'd heard enough stories over the years to know the Mitchell family dynamics. Remember when you came home from Afghanistan with PTSD? Who helped you then? Not your father, not your brother. You fought through that alone while they worried more about Ryan's latest gambling debts. He was right, but it didn't change anything. I initiated the wire transfer, $50,000 to Robert Mitchell, with the memo line reading, Family Loan, Store. The money left my account at 9:47 a.m. At 10:15 a.m., I was on a conference call with the Department of Homeland Security finalizing details on our massive security contract when my phone buzzed with a text. I ignored it, focusing on the call that would transform my business from a regional player into a national security contractor. The call lasted 90 minutes. By the time it ended, I had verbal confirmation that Mitchell Security Solutions had won the largest government security contract ever awarded to a veteran-owned small business in Iowa. The signing ceremony would happen next week, complete with a press conference and state officials. My company would be featured in trade publications. Everything I'd worked for since leaving the Army was about to pay off. I was riding high on adrenaline and success when I finally checked my phone. The text was from Dad, sent 28 minutes after I'd wired him the money. Money received. You're a good daughter, but Ryan deserves this opportunity more than you. He's the one who should be running the family business. Thanks for the help. I read it 3 times before the words fully sank in. Not, thank you. Not, I'm grateful. Not, I'm proud of what you've built. Ryan deserves this opportunity more than you. I had just saved his business, sacrificed my financial security, and proven myself capable of landing multi-million-dollar government contracts. And his response was to tell me that my gambling-addicted, irresponsible brother deserved more than I did? The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto my desk. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The success of the government contract, the validation I had felt just minutes before, all of it evaporated in the face of my father's casual dismissal. This was my family. This was how they saw me even now, even after everything. I sat there in my office, surrounded by the awards and contracts and photographs that represented 3 years of building something from nothing, and realized that no amount of success would ever be enough for Robert Mitchell to see me as anything more than the daughter who could be counted on to fix everyone else's problems. But what I didn't know yet was that my phone was about to ring again, and the voice on the other end would deliver news that would change everything I thought I knew about my worth, my future, and my place in the world. The real story was just beginning.
To understand how deeply my father's text cut, you need to understand the Mitchell family dynamics that had been carved in stone since the day I was born. In the Mitchell household of Cedar Falls, Iowa, there was an unspoken hierarchy that everyone understood, but no one dared to question openly. At the top sat my father, Robert Mitchell, a man who'd built Mitchell's tools and hardware from a single failing storefront into the go-to destination for contractors and DIY enthusiasts across 3 counties. Dad was old school in every sense of the word. He believed in hard work, traditional values, and the natural order of things. In his world, sons inherited businesses, daughters married well, and questioning that system was tantamount to betraying everything he'd worked to build. Next came my older brother Ryan, 2 years my senior, and the undisputed crown prince of our family kingdom. Ryan had arrived first, which in Dad's mind meant he'd won life's lottery. From the moment Ryan could walk, Dad was grooming him to take over the hardware store. Weekend trips to suppliers, lessons in inventory management, tutorials on customer service, discussions about profit margins over dinner. Ryan got the full business education, whether he wanted it or not. Then there was my mother, Patricia Mitchell, a woman who'd sacrificed her own dreams to support Dad's ambitions. Mom had been a teacher before marriage with aspirations of becoming a principal, maybe even running for the school board. Instead, she became the perfect hardware store wife, managing the books, handling customer complaints, organizing the company picnics, and raising the kids who would carry on the Mitchell legacy. She loved us fiercely, but she'd learned to love us within the boundaries Dad had established. And finally, at the bottom of this carefully constructed hierarchy, there was me, Jessica Ann Mitchell, born 2 years too late and with the wrong chromosomes to matter in my father's grand plan. Don't get me wrong, Dad loved me in his way, but his love came with limitations, expectations, and a ceiling I could sense even as a child. The pattern started early. When Ryan showed interest in something, it became a family priority. When he wanted to play Little League, Dad coached his team. When Ryan expressed curiosity about the hardware business, Dad created a special junior assistant position for him with a miniature apron and his own set of keys. When Ryan struggled with math in middle school, Dad hired a tutor and spent hours helping him with homework. When I showed interest in those same things, the response was different, more measured, more conditional. I remember being 8 years old, standing in the hardware store on a Saturday morning, watching Dad explain different types of screws to Ryan. The way Dad's face lit up when Ryan asked questions, the pride in his voice when he said, "That's my boy, always thinking ahead." I wanted that attention, that approval so desperately. "Dad, can you teach me about screws too?" I asked, tugging on his work shirt. He smiled and patted my head absently. "Screws are boring stuff, princess. Why don't you go help your mom with inventory? She needs someone good with numbers." It was true, I was exceptional with numbers. Even in elementary school, I could calculate sales tax faster than the register, spot accounting errors that adults missed, and organize inventory systems that made the store run more efficiently. But somehow, being good with numbers made me useful rather than valuable. I became the family's little accountant, the one who could be counted on to catch mistakes and solve problems, but never the one being groomed for leadership. Ryan, meanwhile, struggled with basic arithmetic and showed little natural aptitude for business, but he was the son. So Dad's investment in his future never wavered. When Ryan made mistakes, they were learning opportunities. When he showed disinterest, Dad assumed it was a phase he'd grow out of. When he demonstrated poor judgment, Dad chalked it up to youth and inexperience. The double standard became more pronounced as we entered high school. Ryan joined the football team, and Dad never missed a game, even if it meant closing the store early. He bought professional photography equipment to document Ryan's athletic career and talked endlessly about his son's potential college scholarships. When Ryan's grades started slipping due to his focus on sports, Dad hired tutors and argued with teachers about extra credit opportunities. I joined the debate team and excelled immediately, winning regional competitions and earning recognition that Ryan's football career never achieved. My trophy case filled up faster than his, my newspaper clippings accumulated in neat stacks, and my academic achievements opened doors to opportunities Ryan could never access. Dad attended exactly 2 debate competitions in 4 years, both times looking uncomfortable and checking his watch frequently. "It's great that you're smart, Jess," he told me after I won the state championship in my junior year. "Intelligence is important for a woman. It'll help you support your husband's career someday." Support someone else's career. Not build my own. Not lead. Not inherit. Support. The most painful example of this dynamic came during my senior year of high school. The store was struggling financially. This was before the major downturn that would eventually lead to Dad's desperate phone call. But there were warning signs. Competition from big box stores was increasing, suppliers were demanding faster payments, and Dad was working 16-hour days trying to keep everything afloat. I spent that entire summer working at Mitchell's Tools and Hardware, not because Dad asked me to, but because I could see how much he was struggling.
I reorganized the entire inventory system, implemented a new point of sale system that streamlined transactions, developed a customer loyalty program that increased repeat business by 30%, and identified 3 major suppliers who were overcharging us for standard items. My innovations saved the store approximately $40,000 that summer and increased revenue by $25,000. I documented everything, presented Dad with detailed reports, and suggested additional improvements that could be implemented over the following year. Ryan spent that same summer lifeguarding at the country club pool, dating cheerleaders, and showing up at the store occasionally to help with heavy lifting when Dad specifically requested his assistance. At the end of the summer, Dad took us both out to dinner at Cedar Falls' nicest restaurant. He raised his glass of beer and smiled proudly. "I want to toast my kids," he said. "Ryan, you've earned this celebration. I know working at the store isn't glamorous, but you've shown real dedication this summer. The business will be in good hands someday." I nearly choked on my water. Ryan had worked maybe 40 hours the entire summer, compared to my 400. But somehow, in Dad's mind, Ryan's minimal participation counted as dedication, while my transformational contributions were invisible. "And Jess," Dad continued, turning to me with a different kind of smile, "I'm proud of how helpful you've been. You've got a real knack for organization. Some lucky man is going to be very fortunate to have you managing his household someday." Managing his household. Not running a business, not leading a team, not building something of my own, managing someone else's household. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by debate trophies and academic awards, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I was not going to spend the next 4 years in college preparing to be someone's supporting character. I was not going to smile politely while Ryan inherited opportunities he never earned. I was not going to accept that my gender determined my worth or my potential. I was going to prove that Jessica Mitchell could build something bigger and more important than anything the Mitchell family had ever imagined. I just had no idea yet how painful that journey would be, or how much it would cost me to discover my own strength. The path I chose would take me thousands of miles from Cedar Falls, through experiences that would test every assumption I'd ever had about myself and my capabilities. But first, I had to find the courage to disappoint the people I loved most in the world. It started with a single conversation that would change everything between my father and me forever. The conversation that would fracture my relationship with my father happened on a cold February evening during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to the University of Iowa with a partial academic scholarship, and everyone assumed I'd major in business or accounting, something practical that would complement whoever I eventually married. But I had other plans. I found Dad in his home office, bent over spreadsheets, as usual, trying to squeeze every penny out of the hardware store's monthly budget. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older than his 52 years. This was how I always pictured him, surrounded by numbers, fighting to keep the family business alive, carrying the weight of everyone's expectations on his shoulders. "Dad, I need to talk to you about college," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. He looked up, adjusting his reading glasses. "What about college? You've got your scholarship, you'll live in the dorms, maybe study business administration. Your mother and I think that's a smart choice for a girl." "I'm not going to college in the fall," I said quietly. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Dad set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying my face as if I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean you're not going to college?" "I'm enlisting in the Army." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Dad's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally something that looked like genuine fear. "The Army?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Jessica, what are you talking about? Why would you even consider such a thing?" I'd practiced this conversation in my head dozens of times,
But sitting there, facing my father's shock, all my prepared arguments seemed to evaporate. How could I explain that I needed to prove myself in an environment where gender wouldn't predetermine my worth? How could I tell him that I was tired of being seen as someone's future supporting character? I want to serve my country, which is true, but incomplete. I want to challenge myself, learn leadership skills, maybe get training in cybersecurity or intelligence. The Army has programs that could set me up for a real career. A real career. Dad's voice was rising now. Jessica, this is insane. The military is no place for a girl like you. You're smart, you're organized, you have opportunities here. Why would you throw that away to play soldier? Play soldier. Just like he dismissed Ryan's various interests over the years, but somehow this felt different, more personal, more cutting. I'm not playing anything, Dad. This is serious. I've already talked to the recruiter, taken the aptitude tests. I scored in the 98th percentile on the ASVAB. They're offering me specialized training in cybersecurity and intelligence analysis. Recruiter? Dad stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backwards. You've been talking to a military recruiter without telling us? I'm 18, Dad. I can make my own decisions. Not decisions this stupid. He was shouting now, something he rarely did. Jessica, you don't understand what you're saying. The military isn't summer camp. It's dangerous. People get hurt. People get killed. And for what? So you can prove some point? Mom appeared in the doorway drawn by the raised voices. She took in the scene, Dad standing behind his desk, face flushed with anger, me sitting rigidly in the chair, both of us breathing hard. "What's going on?" she asked softly. "Your daughter has lost her mind," he said without looking away from me. "She wants to join the Army instead of going to college." Mom's hand went to her throat, a gesture I recognized from childhood whenever she was genuinely frightened. "Jessica, honey, is this true?" I turned to face her, seeing my own features reflected in her worried expression. "Mom, I know it's not what you expected, but I've thought this through. The Army can give me training and experience I'll never get anywhere else. When I come out, I'll have skills, leadership experience, veteran preferences for government jobs. You'll have trauma," Dad interrupted. "You'll have nightmares. You'll have emotional problems that will follow you for the rest of your life. Is that what you want?" "What I want is to build something meaningful with my life. I want to prove that I'm capable of more than just supporting someone else's dreams." "So this is about Ryan," Dad said, suddenly quiet. "This is about the store." "This isn't about Ryan. This is about me. About the fact that you've never once considered that I might be capable of leading something important. About the fact that you see my intelligence as a tool for helping other people succeed, rather than something I can use to build my own success." Dad shook his head slowly. "Jessica, you don't understand. The world is different for women. Harder, more dangerous. I'm trying to protect you from disappointment and heartbreak. By limiting my options? By assuming I'm not strong enough to handle challenges? By being realistic about what life is like for girls in professions dominated by men."
So, your solution is to keep me in professions dominated by men where I'll always be subordinate? The logic of my argument seemed to catch him off guard. He sat back down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. "Jess," he said, his voice gentler now, "I know you think I don't believe in you, but that's not true. I think you're incredibly capable. That's exactly why I don't want to see you waste your talents in some military bureaucracy where you'll spend 4 years taking orders from people who aren't half as smart as you are. And then what? Come home and take orders from a husband who isn't half as smart as me?" Mom stepped further into the room. "Jessica, that's not fair. Your father just wants what's best for you."
What's best for me according to whom? I asked. Dad, when Ryan wanted to play football, you supported him even though he wasn't particularly good at it. When he wanted to take automotive classes instead of college prep, you said it was important for him to follow his interests. But when I want to serve my country and develop skills that could lead to a meaningful career, suddenly it's too dangerous and too risky? That's different, and you know it, Dad said. How is it different? Because Ryan is... He stopped himself, but we all heard the unfinished sentence hanging in the air. Because Ryan is a boy. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked stricken, Dad stared at his hands, and I felt something shift inside me. A door closing on the little girl who'd spent her entire life trying to earn her father's approval. The papers are already signed, I said quietly. I ship out to Fort Benning for basic training in June. Dad's head snapped up. You signed already without discussing it with us? I'm an adult, Dad. And you just answered my question about how different you think my life should be from Ryan's. I turned to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me at the doorway. Jessica, if you do this, don't expect me to pretend I think it's a good decision. And don't expect me to bail you out when you realize you've made a mistake. I looked back at him, seeing clearly for the first time how small his world really was, how limited his vision of my potential had always been. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. That night, I lay in bed listening to my parents argue in hushed voices downstairs. Mom wanted Dad to be more supportive. Dad insisted he was being realistic about the dangers I'd face. Neither of them seemed to consider that maybe, just maybe, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into and was strong enough to handle it. 3 months after graduation, I graduated high school with the highest GPA in my class. Dad attended the ceremony but barely spoke to me. Ryan, who'd graduated 2 years earlier with a C average, got a new truck for graduation. I got a lukewarm congratulations and a lecture about how it was too late to change my mind about the military. 5 weeks after graduation, Mom drove me to the military processing station in Des Moines. Dad stayed home, claiming he had too much work at the store. As the bus pulled away, taking me toward basic training and an uncertain future, I realized I was embarking on more than just military service. I was beginning a journey to discover who Jessica Mitchell could become when she stopped trying to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be. What I didn't know yet was just how much that journey would cost me or how much I'd discover about my own strength in the process.
Basic training at Fort Benning was everything Dad had warned me it would be, and nothing like he'd imagined I could handle. The first week nearly broke me. Not because of the physical demands, though the Georgia heat and endless push-ups certainly tested my limits, but because of the psychological warfare that came with being one of only 12 women in a company of 180 recruits. Drill Sergeant Martinez made it clear from day one that he didn't believe women belonged in combat roles. Mitchell, he'd bark during morning PT, "Your boyfriend isn't here to carry your pack for you. Move your sorry butt or you'll get everyone in trouble." The male recruits, most of them barely 18 and desperate to prove their own toughness, took their cue from Martinez. They'd mutter comments about weak links and political correctness whenever I struggled with something. During our first major field exercise, when I had to carry a wounded soldier simulation, 3 different guys offered to help in voices dripping with condescension. I refused every offer. By week 6, something had shifted. Not because I'd suddenly become the strongest or fastest recruit, but because I'd proven I wouldn't quit. When Private Johnson collapsed during a 20-mile ruck march, I redistributed the weight from his pack into mine and helped him finish.
When the entire company was punished for one recruit's mistake, I never complained or pointed fingers. When other recruits struggled with the technical aspects of our training, I helped them study without expecting anything in return. Drill Sergeant Martinez pulled me aside after our final exercise. "Mitchell," he said, his tone different than it had been for 3 months, "you're tougher than I thought when you got here." "Thank you, Drill Sergeant." "Don't thank me yet," he said, with something that might have been a smile. "Basic training is the easy part. You've got advanced individual training next, then your first assignment. The real test isn't whether you can do push-ups or shoot straight. It's whether you can earn respect from people who don't want to give it to you." He was right. AIT at Fort Gordon, where I trained in cybersecurity and signals intelligence, was where I truly found my calling. While other soldiers complained about the technical complexity of our coursework, I thrived. Code breaking, network analysis, threat assessment, it all clicked for me in ways that surprised even my instructors. Staff Sergeant Williams, our lead instructor, was a career soldier who'd seen everything the Army had to offer. She was also one of the first women to serve in military intelligence roles when they opened to females in the 1990s. "Mitchell," she said after I'd scored perfect marks on our midterm examination, "you've got real talent for this work. Have you considered making the Army a career?" "I'm committed to my initial 8-year obligation. After that, I'm not sure." "Think bigger," she urged. "With your aptitude scores and performance here, you could be looking at officer candidate school, advanced training at NSA facilities, maybe even assignment to special operations support units. Don't limit yourself to what you thought you wanted when you enlisted." Her words planted a seed that would grow throughout my first deployment. I graduated AIT as the honor graduate, first in my class of 150 soldiers, and received orders to join the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, with deployment to Afghanistan scheduled for 6 months later. I called home to share the news. Mom was proud and worried. Dad was... Dad. "Hawaii sounds nice," he said when I told him about my assignment. "Maybe you'll meet a nice officer and settle down somewhere tropical." Even my military achievements were filtered through his lens of what he thought my life should look like. Afghanistan changed everything. Our forward operating base in Kandahar province was a small outpost supporting combat operations throughout the region. As one of only 3 intelligence analysts assigned to the base, I was responsible for processing and analyzing communications intercepts, identifying threat patterns, and briefing combat units before their missions. The work was intense and meaningful in ways I'd never experienced. The intelligence I provided directly impacted the safety of soldiers conducting patrols and raids. When I identified enemy communication patterns or predicted likely ambush locations, lives were literally at stake. My first month in country, I intercepted communication suggesting a major attack on our base was being planned. The details were fragmented across multiple intercepts, but I was able to piece together enough information to predict the likely timing and approach routes. When I presented my analysis to the base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Roberts, he listened carefully but seemed skeptical. "Specialist Mitchell," he said after reviewing my report, "this is a significant conclusion based on limited evidence. Are you certain about your assessment?" "Sir, I'm confident in the pattern analysis and the threat indicators. I recommend increasing security posture and repositioning defensive elements."
He stared at me for a long moment. A 20-year-old female specialist was telling a career officer with multiple combat deployments that she'd identified a major threat he'd missed. "Implement your recommendations," he said finally. "If you're wrong, we'll have wasted some time and resources. If you're right..." The attack came exactly when and where I'd predicted. Thanks to the defensive preparations, what could have been a catastrophic assault on our base was repelled with minimal casualties. 3 enemy fighters were killed, several captured, and a major supply cache was discovered during follow-up operations. Colonel Roberts called me into his office the next morning. "Specialist Mitchell," he said, standing when I entered. "Outstanding work. That analysis likely saved lives." "Thank you, sir. Just doing my job." "No," he said firmly. "That wasn't just doing your job. That was exceptional intelligence work under pressure. Have you given any thought to officer candidate school?"
The seed Sergeant Staff Williams had planted began to sprout. Maybe I could build a career that mattered. Maybe I could prove to myself and to Dad that Jessica Mitchell was capable of leading, not just supporting. 6 months into my deployment, I met Derek Santos. Derek was a sergeant with the 75th Ranger Regiment, assigned to our base for a series of special operations missions. Unlike many of the combat soldiers who viewed intel analysts as rear echelon support troops, Derek understood the value of what we did. He'd request detailed briefings before his missions and actually listen to our recommendations. "You know your stuff, Mitchell," he said after I'd briefed his team on a particularly complex target analysis. "Most intel people give us generic threat assessments. You're painting a picture of exactly what we're walking into." Derek became my closest friend in Afghanistan. We'd spend our rare downtime talking about our plans after the military, our families back home, our dreams for the future. He was the first person I'd met who truly understood my drive to prove myself, partly because he came from a similar background, a working-class family in Colorado, where his father had expected him to take over the family construction business. "My old man thinks I'm wasting my time playing soldier," Derek told me one evening as we watched the sunset from our base's defensive walls. "He can't understand why anyone would choose this life when they could have a steady job back home." "At least your father acknowledges that what you're doing is difficult," I replied. "Mine still thinks I'm going through a phase." "Their loss," Derek said. "Anyone who can't see how good you are at this job is blind." It was Derek who saved my life and mine who saved his during the incident that would define both of our military careers and bond us permanently. We were returning from a mission briefing at a forward patrol base when our convoy hit an improvised explosive device. The blast flipped our vehicle and left me trapped with a concussion and what I later learned was a fractured collarbone. Derek, who was in the vehicle behind mine, dismounted under enemy fire to pull me from the wreckage. As he was dragging me to cover, sniper fire erupted from a nearby building. I saw the muzzle flash and realized Derek was exposed. Despite my injuries and disorientation, I managed to spot the sniper's position and direct return fire from our support elements. The accurate fire suppression allowed Derek to get us both to safety. For that action, I was awarded the Bronze Star with V device for valor. Derek received the same decoration for his rescue efforts under fire. The day we received our medals, I called home to share the news. Mom cried with pride. Dad's response was more measured. "I'm glad you're safe. When are you coming home?" "I've got 6 more months on this deployment, then I'm applying for officer candidate school." There was a long pause. "Jessica, you've proven your point. You're tough. You're brave. We all acknowledge that. But don't you think it's time to come home and build a real life?" A real life? After I'd just received one of the military's highest decorations for valor? After I'd proven myself capable of life and death decision-making under the most extreme circumstances, he still didn't consider what I was building to be real? That conversation was the moment I realized that no amount of external validation would ever be enough to change my father's fundamental assumptions about my worth and potential. The approval I'd been seeking from him my entire life was never going to come, not because I wasn't worthy of it, but because he was incapable of seeing me as anything other than his little girl who needed protection and guidance. For the first time in my life, I stopped caring whether Robert Mitchell was proud of me. I started caring whether I was proud of myself. And as I looked forward to 6 more months in Afghanistan, followed by officer candidate school and potentially a military career, I realized I was finally building the life I wanted rather than the life others expected from me. The question was, what would happen when I eventually returned to Cedar Falls, carrying the confidence and capabilities I'd developed to face a family that had never really changed their expectations of who I should be?
Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The plane touched down at Des Moines International Airport on a gray March morning in 2019. I'd been gone for 4 years. Basic training, advanced training, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and officer candidate school. The woman stepping off that plane bore little resemblance to the 18-year-old girl who'd left Cedar Falls with something to prove and everything to lose. I was now Second Lieutenant Jessica Mitchell, decorated combat veteran, intelligence officer, and someone who'd learned to trust her own judgment under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. I'd led teams, made life and death decisions, and earned the respect of people who'd initially doubted me. I was confident, capable, and ready to take on whatever challenges civilian life might offer.
What I wasn't prepared for was how little had changed in the world I'd left behind. Mom was waiting at the airport, tears streaming down her face as she ran toward me. Her hug was fierce, desperate, as if she could somehow make up for 4 years of worry and separation with the intensity of that embrace. My baby girl! You're home! You're finally home! Dad stood awkwardly behind her, hands shoved deep into his pockets. When Mom finally released me, he stepped forward and extended his hand for a formal handshake. "Welcome home, Jessica. You look official." Official. Not proud, not accomplished, not impressive. Official. The drive back to Cedar Falls was filled with Mom's excited chatter about everything I'd missed. Mrs. Henderson next door had gotten remarried. The old Dairy Queen had been torn down and replaced with a Starbucks. Ryan had moved back in with them temporarily after his latest business venture had failed. What kind of business venture, I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. He tried to start a landscaping company, Dad said, his voice carefully neutral. It didn't work out. The economy's been tough. Translation: Ryan had borrowed money he couldn't repay, made promises he couldn't keep, and left other people to clean up his mess. Again. "Where is Ryan?" I asked. "He's at the store," Mom said quickly, "helping your father with inventory. He's been such a help since he moved back home." I nodded, filing away the information. Ryan was 26 years old, living with our parents, and being praised for doing basic inventory work at the family business. Meanwhile, I just spent 4 years serving my country, earned a commission as an officer, and received combat decorations. Yet somehow, Ryan was still the success story in our family narrative. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left. My bedroom had been preserved like a shrine to the girl I used to be. Debate team trophies on the shelves, academic awards on the walls, a twin bed with the same floral comforter I'd had since middle school. It felt like stepping into a museum exhibit of someone else's life. That evening, the whole family gathered for what Mom called my welcome home dinner. She'd made all my childhood favorites: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. Ryan showed up 20 minutes late, apologizing about getting caught up with something at the store. He looked older than his 26 years, with the soft physique and tired eyes of someone who'd been coasting through life without real purpose. When he hugged me, I could smell alcohol on his breath, despite it being only 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Hey, little sister," he said with forced joviality. "Look at you in your fancy uniform. Very impressive." There was something in his tone that reminded me of Dad's official comment: acknowledgement without admiration, recognition without respect. Over dinner, Mom peppered me with questions about military life, wanting to know everything about my experiences. Dad asked practical questions about my discharge benefits and what I planned to do next. Ryan mostly ate in silence, occasionally making comments that revealed how little he understood about what I'd actually been doing for 4 years. "So you were basically like a secretary, right? Filing reports and stuff." I set down my fork carefully. I was an intelligence analyst. I processed and analyzed enemy communications, identified threat patterns, and briefed combat units on tactical situations. "Right, paperwork," Ryan said, taking another drink of beer. "Must have been nice to have a safe job while the real soldiers were out fighting." The comment hit like a physical blow. Dad didn't correct him. Mom looked uncomfortable, but didn't speak up. I was now 18 again, sitting at this same table, listening to my achievements being minimized and dismissed. But I wasn't 18 anymore. "Actually, Ryan," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I was awarded the Bronze Star with V device for actions under enemy fire. The V stands for valor, which means I was recognized for heroism in combat. I spent 14 months in forward operating bases in Afghanistan, often under direct threat. But you're right about one thing. I did do paperwork. I wrote intelligence reports that helped save American lives." The table fell silent.
Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom looked proud, but worried about the tension. Ryan's face flushed red. "I didn't mean," he started. "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "Just like you meant it when we were kids and you'd dismiss everything I accomplished because it wasn't what you thought mattered. Some things never change, I guess." Dad cleared his throat. "Jessica, Ryan was just trying to understand what you did over there. No need to get defensive." Defensive. The same word he'd used when I'd argued for my right to pursue my own dreams 4 years earlier. "I'm not being defensive, Dad. I'm being accurate. There's a difference." After dinner, I helped Mom clean up while Dad and Ryan retreated to the living room to watch television. As we worked side by side at the kitchen sink, Mom finally said what she'd been thinking all evening. "You've changed," she said softly. "I hope so. 4 years of military service tends to do that to a person." "You're harder, more confident. You don't let things slide anymore." I considered her words as I dried a plate. "I learned that my opinion matters, Mom. I learned that I don't have to accept other people's assumptions about what I'm capable of." "Your father and Ryan don't mean any harm," she said, the same excuse she'd been making my entire life. "They just don't understand." "They don't understand because they don't want to understand. There's a difference." Over the following weeks, the pattern became clear. Dad and Ryan had developed a comfortable routine during my absence. Ryan worked at the store sporadically, lived rent-free at home, and was treated as if his occasional contributions were major achievements. Dad enabled this arrangement while complaining privately about Ryan's lack of responsibility and ambition. Meanwhile, my presence disrupted their equilibrium. I asked pointed questions about the store's finances, suggested improvements to their outdated systems, and refused to pretend that Ryan's minimal efforts were impressive. I was a reminder of what accountability and achievement actually looked like. The breaking point came 3 weeks after my return. I'd been staying with my parents while I figured out my next steps, using my military savings carefully while I decided whether to pursue graduate school, look for corporate work, or maybe even start my own business. Derek Santos, my army buddy, called me one evening with an interesting proposition. "Jess, I've been thinking about our conversations in Afghanistan. Remember how we used to talk about starting a security consulting company when we got out?" "I remember you talking about it. I was focused on making the Army a career back then." "Well, I'm serious about it now. I've been researching the market, and there's huge demand for cybersecurity consulting, especially for small and medium businesses that can't afford a full-time security staff. With your intelligence background and my operational experience, we could build something real." The idea intrigued me. I'd been feeling restless and unchallenged since returning home. The prospect of building something from scratch using the skills I developed appealed to me in ways that traditional employment didn't. "What would something like that require to get started?" I asked. "Initial investment, probably around $50,000 for equipment, certifications, office space, legal fees. I've got about half of that saved up. What about you?" I had exactly $47,000 in savings for my military service. 4 years of careful budgeting and automatic allotments had built up a decent nest egg. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to take a calculated risk on something that could be extraordinary. "Let me think about it," I said. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been looking for." That night, I lay in my childhood bed, surrounded by reminders of who I used to be, and thought about who I wanted to become. I could play it safe, use my veteran preferences to get a government job, settle into a comfortable but unremarkable career. Or I could bet on myself, use everything I'd learned in the Army, and build something that would prove once and for all that Jessica Mitchell was capable of extraordinary things. The decision, when I finally made it, felt inevitable. I was going to start a business with Derek Santos. I was going to build something meaningful and important. And I was going to do it without asking anyone in my family for permission or approval.
What I didn't anticipate was how quickly that decision would create a crisis that would test every assumption my family had about success, responsibility, and who deserved support when everything fell apart. The seeds of the conflict that would eventually lead to that devastating text from my father were already being planted, though none of us realized it at the time.
The decision to start Mitchell Security Solutions with Derek wasn't made lightly. I spent 2 weeks researching the cybersecurity market, analyzing our potential competition, and developing a business plan that would have impressed any MBA program. What I discovered was both exciting and daunting. The cybersecurity industry was exploding. Small and medium businesses were increasingly targets of sophisticated cyber attacks, but most couldn't afford enterprise-level security solutions or full-time security staff. There was a massive gap in the market for high-quality, affordable cybersecurity consulting aimed at businesses with 50 to 500 employees. Derek and I had complementary skills that positioned us perfectly to fill that gap. His operational background gave him expertise in physical security, threat assessment, and crisis management. My intelligence training had taught me to think like an attacker, identify vulnerabilities, and develop comprehensive defense strategies. Together, we could offer clients a complete security solution that most consulting firms couldn't match. The business plan was solid. The market opportunity was real. The only question was whether I had the courage to bet everything on myself. I called Derek on a Thursday evening and told him I was in. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This isn't like military service, Jess. There's no steady paycheck, no guaranteed benefits. If we fail, we failed completely." "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. I've been playing it safe my whole life, trying to prove myself in other people's systems. It's time to build something of my own. We agreed to meet in Des Moines the following month to start setting up operations. Derek would drive out from Colorado, and we'd spend 2 weeks finding office space, registering the business, and beginning our client outreach. The night before Derek arrived, I sat my parents down to explain what I was planning. "A security company?" Dad asked, looking puzzled. "What kind of security company?" "Cybersecurity consulting," I explained. "We'll help businesses protect their computer systems and data from hackers and cyber attacks." "And people will pay for that?" "Dad, cybercrime costs American businesses over $600 billion annually. Companies are desperate for help, but most security firms focus on large corporations. We're targeting the underserved small and medium business market." Dad leaned back in his chair, the same expression on his face that I'd seen whenever I'd tried to explain my military intelligence work. It was the look of someone trying to understand a foreign language. "How much money are you investing in this venture?" he asked. "Most of my savings, about $47,000. Mom gasped. "Jessica, honey, that's all the money you've saved from 4 years in the Army." "It's an investment in my future, Mom. Derek and I have done the research, the market is there, we have the skills, and we have a solid business plan." "Business plans don't guarantee success," Dad said, "especially in industries you don't understand. Technology changes constantly. What happens when your expertise becomes obsolete? Then we learn and adapt. That's what successful businesses do." "Successful businesses have experienced leadership," Dad continued. "You're 22 years old with no business experience. Your partner is, 24? You're playing with serious money here, Jessica." "Playing?" The same word he'd used to dismiss my military service 4 years earlier? "Dad, I managed multi-million-dollar intelligence operations in Afghanistan. I briefed generals and made decisions that affected entire military campaigns. I think I can handle running a small business." "Military experience doesn't translate to business success," he said firmly. "The private sector is different, more competitive, less forgiving of mistakes." I felt that familiar frustration rising, the same feeling I'd had as a teenager when Dad would dismiss my achievements. But I was no longer that teenager. "You know what, Dad? You're right that this is risky. Starting any business is risky. But the biggest risk I can take is not believing in myself." The conversation ended awkwardly, with Mom expressing worry about my financial security and Dad making vague comments about hoping I wouldn't regret my decision. Ryan, who'd been conspicuously absent from the family dinner where I'd announced my plans,
showed up the next morning as I was loading my car to drive to Des Moines. "So I hear you're starting a business," he said, leaning against my car door. "That's the plan. With all your army money?" "It's my money, Ryan. I earned it." He was quiet for a moment, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "I think it's cool," he said. "Starting your own thing, I mean, takes guts." I turned to look at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I tried to start that landscaping company last year," he continued. "It was a disaster, but at least I tried, you know? Most people just talk about their dreams. You're actually doing something about yours." It was the first genuinely supportive thing Ryan had said to me in years. "What went wrong with the landscaping business?" I asked.
He shrugged. Poor planning, mostly. I thought having a truck and some equipment was enough. Turns out there's a lot more to running a business than I realized. Marketing, accounting, customer service, insurance. I was way over my head. Have you thought about trying again? Maybe starting smaller? Learning as you go? Dad thinks I should focus on the hardware store, Ryan said. He says entrepreneurship is too risky for someone with my track record. I heard the hurt in his voice and realized that Dad's limiting beliefs affected both of us, just in different ways. Ryan was discouraged from trying because he'd failed before. I was discouraged from trying because Dad couldn't imagine me succeeding. "Ryan," I said carefully, "what do you actually want to do with your life?" He looked surprised by the question. "I don't know. I used to think I wanted to take over Dad's store, but honestly, I'm not sure retail is my thing. I like being outdoors, working with my hands, building things. That sounds like landscaping could be a good fit if you approached it differently." "Maybe," he said, "but I can't afford to fail again. Dad's already bailing me out on rent and everything. What if you didn't have to worry about failing? What if you started smaller? Maybe you worked for someone else's landscaping company first to learn the business side." Ryan's face brightened slightly. "I hadn't thought about that. You could learn customer service, pricing, scheduling, all the stuff that tripped you up the first time. Then when you're ready to go out on your own again, you'd have real experience." "That's actually a pretty good idea," he said. "Dad probably wouldn't love it, but it makes sense." As I drove toward Des Moines that morning, I reflected on the conversation with Ryan. For the first time in our adult lives, we'd talked to each other as equals rather than as competing siblings. He'd supported my business venture, and I'd tried to help him think through his own challenges. Maybe the Mitchell family dynamics could evolve after all. Derek met me at a coffee shop near downtown Des Moines, and we spent the morning looking at potential office spaces. We found a perfect spot in a renovated warehouse that had been converted to small business offices, affordable rent, good location, and neighbors who were mostly other entrepreneurs and consultants. "This feels right," Derek said as we walked through the empty office that would become Mitchell Security Solutions headquarters. "It does," I agreed. "Let's do this." We signed the lease that afternoon, officially making ourselves business owners. Over the following 2 weeks, we set up equipment, registered the business, obtained necessary certifications, and began our marketing outreach. The first few months were a roller coaster of excitement and terror. We landed our first client, a small manufacturing company that had experienced a minor security breach and needed help updating their systems. The project went perfectly, and they referred us to 2 other businesses. By month 3, we had 5 steady clients and were generating enough revenue to cover our basic expenses. By month 6, we'd hired our first employee, a recent college graduate with a cybersecurity degree who brought fresh technical skills to complement our experience. The business was working. Slowly, carefully, but unmistakably working. Dad remained skeptical, though he stopped making overtly negative comments about our experiment. Mom was cautiously optimistic, especially when she saw how energized and focused I had become. And Ryan, to my surprise, became one of our biggest cheerleaders. "My sister's a badass entrepreneur," he'd tell anyone who would listen, "building a tech company from scratch." What none of us anticipated was how quickly success would create new challenges.
and how a family crisis involving Ryan's ongoing struggles would put me in a position where I'd have to choose between my business's future and my family's immediate needs. The foundations of everything were solid. The business was growing. My confidence was building. My relationship with my family was slowly improving. But storms were gathering that would test every assumption we'd made about loyalty, responsibility, and who in the Mitchell family deserved support when everything started falling apart.
By the spring of 2021, Mitchell Security Solutions had grown beyond my most optimistic projections. We had 15 steady clients, 4 full-time employees, and monthly revenue that had Derek and me talking seriously about expanding into other markets. The little office in Des Moines had become the headquarters of something real and sustainable. I was living in a small apartment near our office, finally independent and building the life I'd envisioned during those long nights in Afghanistan. For the first time since returning from military service, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not as someone's daughter or sister, but as Jessica Mitchell, CEO and co-founder of a growing company. That sense of stability was shattered by a phone call at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in May. "Jess, it's Mom." Her voice was strained, barely controlled. "I need you to come home. Tonight, if you can." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Your father is fine. It's Ryan. He's in serious trouble." I was already reaching for my car keys. "What kind of trouble?" "Legal trouble. Financial trouble. I can't explain everything over the phone, but he needs our help. The family needs to come together on this." The drive from Des Moines to Cedar Falls had never felt longer. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Ryan had always been irresponsible with money, but legal trouble suggested something more serious than his usual poor judgment. I found my parents in the living room at 1 a.m., both looking like they'd aged 5 years since I'd seen them 2 weeks earlier. Mom was clutching a tissue, her eyes red from crying. Dad sat rigid in his chair, staring at the floor with the expression of someone who just watched his world collapse. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. "County jail," Dad said without looking up. "Arrested this morning." "For what?" Mom and Dad exchanged a look that told me I wasn't going to like the answer. "Embezzlement," Dad said quietly. "From the hardware store." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair across from them, trying to process what I just heard. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $57,000, Mom whispered, "over the past 18 months. $57,000, nearly everything I'd invested in my business, more than most people made in an entire year. How? How did he take that much without you noticing?" Dad's face flushed with embarrassment. "He had access to the accounts. I trusted him to handle daily deposits and some vendor payments. He was creative about how he moved money around." Creative was a generous way to describe systematic theft from the family business. The bank caught it during their quarterly audit. They called me yesterday morning, and by afternoon, Ryan was in custody. I stared at my parents. These people who'd spent my entire life telling me to be responsible, to be careful, to avoid risks. They'd enabled Ryan to steal nearly $60,000 from their own business through simple negligence and misplaced trust. "What did he spend it on?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Gambling debts, mostly. Some of it went to that woman he's been seeing. Expensive trips, jewelry. He says he was trying to invest some of it to pay back what he had taken, but he lost that too," I finished. Dad nodded miserably. "Jessica, I know this is a lot to ask, but we need your help. The lawyer says bail is set at $75,000. We need to post 10% to get him out, then figure out restitution. $7,500 for bail,
$57,000 for restitution, plus legal fees that would probably run another $20,000 minimum. We were looking at close to $85,000 in immediate expenses. Dad, I said carefully, do you have that kind of money available? The silence answered my question. The store's account is frozen pending the investigation. Our personal savings won't cover it, and with Ryan's arrest, the bank is calling in our business line of credit. I felt a familiar weight settling on my shoulders. The weight of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the daughter who could be counted on to fix everyone else's problems. What about a lawyer? I asked. Has Ryan talked to anyone? We hired Bill Peterson. You remember him. He handled our business incorporation years ago. He's good, but he's expensive. He says Ryan's best option is probably to plea bargain, accept responsibility, and hope for probation with restitution. And if he doesn't get probation? 2 to 5 years in state prison, Dad said quietly. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. Dad appeared to have aged a decade overnight, all his swagger and confidence stripped away by his son's betrayal. Mom was holding herself together through sheer force of will, but I could see the cracks in her composure. They were broken people, asking their daughter to save them from the consequences of their own poor judgment and favoritism. Jess, Mom said, reaching for my hand, I know your father and I haven't always supported you the way we should have, but you're the only one who can help us now. You're the only one with resources.
Resources. The money I'd earned through 4 years of military service, 2 combat deployments, and months of careful business planning was now being viewed as the family's emergency fund. Mom, that money represents everything I've built. It's my business reserve fund, my personal safety net. If I drain my accounts to bail out Ryan, Mitchell Security Solutions becomes vulnerable to any unexpected expense or economic downturn. Your business will survive, Dad said, looking at me directly for the first time that evening. Family is more important than business. Family. The same family that had dismissed my achievements, minimized my military service, and treated my business success as a cute hobby. Now, suddenly, family was the most important thing. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice level, where was this concern for family when I was struggling to prove myself? When I needed support and encouragement instead of skepticism and criticism? That's different, and you know it, he replied. Ryan made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. He just needs help getting back on track. I made different choices, but I still needed family support. The difference is that I never asked you to bail me out of problems I created for myself. The conversation continued for another hour, going in circles. My parents needed money they didn't have to save Ryan from consequences he'd earned. I was the only family member with significant resources, therefore, I was responsible for solving the problem. The logic was simple and infuriating. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I told them I needed time to think. How much time? Dad asked urgently. Ryan's been in jail for 2 days already. The longer he stays there, the harder it will be for him to recover from this. I'll have an answer by tomorrow evening, I promised. I drove back to Des Moines as the sun was rising, my mind churning through options and implications. I could drain my business and personal accounts to save Ryan from prison, leaving myself financially vulnerable but keeping the family intact. I could refuse to help, protecting my business but potentially watching my brother go to prison and my parents lose everything. Or I could find a middle ground, help with bail and partial restitution while setting strict conditions on my assistance. When I walked into the office that morning, Derek took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. Family emergency, I explained, and told him everything. Derek listened without interruption, then leaned back in his chair and shook his head. Jess, I've known you for 5 years. You're going to help them, aren't you? I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants to let Ryan face the consequences of his actions. Part of me can't stand by and watch my family implode. And part of you is still trying to prove to your father that you're worthy of his approval, Derek said gently. His words stung because they were partially true. Despite everything I'd accomplished, despite building a successful business and creating my own identity, I was still that little girl who wanted her father to be proud of her. What would you do? I asked.
I'd help, Derek said without hesitation. Not because they deserve it, but because you'd never forgive yourself if you didn't. But I'd set conditions, strict ones. That evening, I called my parents and told them I would help with the bail and contribute toward restitution, but only under specific conditions. Ryan would enter a treatment program for gambling addiction, he would never again have access to family business accounts, and he would pay me back over time, even if it took years. Dad's relief was palpable. Jessica, I can't tell you how much this means to us. Don't thank me yet, Dad. This is going to cost me everything I've saved and it puts my business at risk. I hope you understand what I'm sacrificing here. I do. And I'm proud of you for putting family first. Proud of me for fixing their mistakes. Not proud of me for building a successful business or serving my country with distinction, but proud of me for being the family's financial safety net. As I hung up the phone and began the process of liquidating my savings to save Ryan from prison, I wondered if I was making the right choice or simply repeating a pattern that had defined my entire relationship with the Mitchell family. I would find out soon enough. And the answer would come in the form of a text message that would shatter whatever illusions I still had about my place in my father's heart.
The next morning, I sat in my office staring at my computer screen, where my business and personal banking information painted a stark picture of what helping Ryan would actually cost me. My business accounts held $32,000 in operating reserves, money we'd saved for equipment upgrades, emergency expenses, and potential expansion opportunities. My personal savings account contained another $23,000, the remainder of my military earnings after investing in the business. $55,000 total. Enough to cover Ryan's bail and make a significant contribution toward restitution, but not enough to solve the problem completely. And withdrawing it would leave both my business and my personal finances dangerously exposed. Derek found me hunched over financial spreadsheets at 7 a.m., trying to calculate the least devastating way to drain my accounts. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he said, setting a cup of coffee on my desk. "Couldn't. I keep running the numbers, hoping I missed something that would make this less catastrophic." Derek pulled up a chair. "Talk me through it." I turned my monitor toward him. "If I withdraw everything available, I can cover the bail and contribute about $40,000 toward restitution. That leaves $17,000 that my family would still need to find somewhere else." "What about the business impact?" "We'd be operating with zero reserves," I admitted. "If we lose a major client, have unexpected equipment failures, or hit any kind of economic downturn, Mitchell Security Solutions could fold within months." Derek was quiet for a moment, studying the numbers. "What if we took out a business loan? Use the company's credit line to help with restitution?" I'd considered that option, but rejected it for practical reasons. Our credit line is only $15,000, and it's designated for business use. Using it for personal expenses would violate our banking agreement. "What about a personal loan for you?" "I've been self-employed for less than 2 years. My debt-to-income ratio doesn't qualify me for anything significant." Derek leaned back, running his hands through his hair. "Jess, this is an impossible situation. Your family is essentially asking you to risk everything you've built to bail Ryan out of problems he created." "I know," I said quietly, "but what's the alternative? Let my brother go to prison? Watch my parents lose their business and possibly their house? Those are consequences of Ryan's choices, not yours. But they're consequences I have the power to prevent." Derek looked at me with the expression I'd learned to recognize during our military service, the look of someone watching a friend make a decision that was simultaneously admirable and potentially self-destructive. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" I nodded slowly. "I have to try to live with myself if I don't." "Then let's figure out how to minimize the damage." We spent the morning developing a financial plan that would preserve some business stability while maximizing my contribution to Ryan's crisis. I would withdraw all of my personal savings and most of the business reserves, leaving us with a minimal operating buffer. Derek would temporarily defer his salary, and we'd delay some planned equipment purchases.
It wasn't ideal, but it was survivable if nothing else went wrong. At noon, I drove to Cedar Falls to meet with my parents and their lawyer. The Mitchell family crisis management meeting took place in the same living room where I had announced my military enlistment 6 years earlier, where I told them about starting my business, where every major conversation of my adult life had played out. Bill Peterson, the family attorney, looked exhausted. He'd clearly been dealing with difficult clients making emotional decisions under pressure. The good news, he said, after reviewing the situation, is that the prosecutor is willing to discuss a plea agreement. Ryan would plead guilty to embezzlement, accept responsibility, and pay full restitution. In exchange, he'd get probation instead of prison time. What about the amount? Dad asked. Full restitution means $57,000 plus court costs and fees. We're looking at about $62,000 total. I did quick math in my head. With my $55,000 and the family's limited resources, we could cover it. Barely. And if he can't pay restitution, Mom asked, then he goes to prison, Peterson said bluntly. The judge won't approve probation without guaranteed restitution. Dad turned to me. Jessica, can you cover the full amount? I can cover $55,000. You'd need to find another $7,000 somewhere else. Dad's face fell. We don't have access to that kind of cash right now. What about a loan against the house? I suggested. We refinanced 2 years ago to cover store expenses. There's not enough equity left. Peterson cleared his throat. There might be another option. If Jessica could guarantee the full amount, perhaps by securing a loan or line of credit, the court would accept a structured payment plan. I felt the walls closing in. They weren't just asking me to drain my savings. They were asking me to personally guarantee debt that could follow me for years. I'll see what I can do, I said finally.
That afternoon, I visited 3 different banks trying to secure additional financing. My business credit was solid but limited. My personal credit was excellent, but my self-employment status worked against me. Finally, at the 3rd bank, a loan officer offered me a personal line of credit for $10,000 at a high interest rate. It was barely enough, but it would work. I called Peterson that evening to confirm I could guarantee the full restitution amount. He would present the plea agreement to the prosecutor the next morning. "This is incredibly generous of you, Jessica," he said. "Your family is lucky to have someone willing to make this kind of sacrifice." Sacrifice. The word stuck with me as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment. I was sacrificing my financial security, my business reserves, and potentially the future of Mitchell's Security Solutions to save Ryan from the consequences of stealing nearly $60,000 from our family business. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Peterson called to confirm the plea agreement had been accepted. I spent hours at banks and financial institutions liquidating accounts and securing the necessary funds. By 3 p.m., I had cashier's checks totaling $62,000 sitting on my desk. Everything I'd saved during my military service, everything I'd carefully preserved to build my business, everything that represented my independence and security, gone to fix Ryan's mistakes. Derek found me staring at the checks. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. "No," I said. "This is the right thing to do. I just hope Ryan understands what it cost." I drove to Cedar Falls that evening to deliver the checks and watch Ryan's release from county jail. Mom cried when she saw him walk out in civilian clothes. Dad shook his hand formally and told him he was glad he was home. Ryan hugged everyone and made generic promises about learning from his mistakes and never letting the family down again. Standing in that jail parking lot, watching my family reunion, I felt strangely detached from the scene. I'd just given up everything I'd worked for to make this moment possible, but no one seemed to truly grasp the magnitude of what had just happened. "Jess," Ryan said, approaching me as the family headed to their cars, "I know what you did. I know what this cost you. I'm going to pay you back, every penny." "Focus on staying out of trouble," I said. "We'll worry about repayment later." As I drove back to Des Moines that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Restitution payment completed. Ryan's plea accepted.
Thank you for saving our family. Saving our family. Not, thank you for your incredible sacrifice, or I'm proud of your generosity, or I'm sorry we had to ask this of you. Just acknowledgement that I'd performed a necessary function. I had no way of knowing that within 6 months, Dad would send me another text, one that would make me question whether saving the Mitchell family had been the biggest mistake of my life. The groundwork was laid, the sacrifice was complete. All that remained was for me to discover what my family's gratitude was actually worth when tested against their fundamental assumptions about who deserved success and who deserved support. That test was coming sooner than any of us imagined.
6 months after draining my life savings to save Ryan from prison, I was sitting in my Des Moines office at 9:30 a.m. on what I thought would be just another Tuesday morning. Mitchell Security Solutions had not just survived the financial crisis I'd created by bailing out my brother, we'd thrived despite it. The months following Ryan's plea agreement had been challenging but transformative. With our reserves depleted, Derek and I had been forced to operate leaner and smarter than ever before. We'd hustled for new clients, streamlined our operations, and discovered that financial constraints could actually spark innovation and efficiency. By February, we'd not only replaced our lost reserves, but exceeded our previous financial position. We'd landed 3 major new contracts, hired 2 additional employees, and established Mitchell Security Solutions as the premier cybersecurity firm in Iowa. Local business journals were featuring us as a startup success story, and we'd been invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences across the Midwest. But the real validation was about to come from an unexpected source. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, with a Washington, D.C. area code. Mitchell Security Solutions, this is Jessica. Miss Mitchell, this is Colonel Sarah Williams from the Department of Homeland Security. I believe we served together in Afghanistan. I was your intelligence training instructor at Fort Gordon. My heart skipped. Colonel Williams had been my mentor during advanced training, the woman who'd first suggested I could have a career in military intelligence. She'd been a model and advocate during some of my most challenging early military experiences. Colonel Williams, it's an honor to hear from you. What can I do for you? Actually, Miss Mitchell, it's what we can do for you. I'm calling about a contract opportunity that I think would be perfect for your company. She went on to explain that DHS was looking for a cybersecurity firm to handle a major project protecting critical infrastructure systems across the Midwest. The contract was worth $2.3 million over 3 years, more than Mitchell Security Solutions had earned in total revenue since our founding. The requirements are very specific, Colonel Williams continued. We need a firm with both technical expertise and personnel who have top secret security clearances. Your military intelligence background and your company's track record make you an ideal candidate. I struggled to keep my voice professional. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. What's the timeline? Proposals are due in 2 weeks. The selection will be made within 30 days after that. If you're interested, I can send you the full RFP today. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. A $2.3 million federal contract would transform Mitchell Security Solutions from a regional consulting firm into a major player in the national cybersecurity market. It would validate everything Derek and I had worked to build and prove that our vision for the company was not just viable, but exceptional. I called Derek immediately. Are you sitting down? I asked when he answered. Should I be? Department of Homeland Security, $2.3 million contract, 3 years. The silence on Derek's end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Derek? You there? Holy shit, Jess, that's incredible. That's company-changing money. It gets better. The lead contact is Colonel Williams, my old mentor from Fort Gordon. She specifically sought us out because of our military backgrounds and security clearances. We spent the next 2 weeks working 18-hour days preparing our proposal. Every aspect of the submission had to be perfect. Technical specifications, project timeline, personnel qualifications, budget projections. We brought in outside consultants to review our work and hired a professional grant writer to polish our presentation. The morning we submitted our proposal, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that reminded me of mission briefings in Afghanistan. We'd done everything possible to position Mitchell Security Solutions for success. Now we had to wait. 3 weeks later, Colonel Williams called with the news that would change my life. Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. Mitchell Security Solutions has been selected for the DHS Critical Infrastructure contract. I nearly dropped the phone. We won? You won. Your proposal was exceptional, and frankly, your company's combination of technical expertise and military experience made you the clear choice. This is a significant achievement for a firm your size. After Colonel Williams explained the next steps, contract signing, security briefings, project kickoff meetings, I hung up and immediately called Derek. We did it, I said as soon as he answered. We won the contract? We won the contract. Derek's whoop was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear.
The rest of that morning was a blur of congratulatory calls, champagne toasts with our employees, and frantic planning for the massive expansion this contract would require. We'd need to hire at least 6 new people, lease additional office space, and upgrade our equipment significantly. By lunchtime, I was riding higher than I'd felt since my military service. Mitchell Security Solutions wasn't just a successful small business anymore. We were about to become a major government contractor with a multi-million-dollar federal project. I decided to call my parents to share the news. After everything they'd been through with Ryan's crisis, after I'd sacrificed so much to hold the family together, I wanted them to understand that their daughter had built something truly exceptional. Mom answered on the second ring. "Hi, honey. What a nice surprise to hear from you on a Tuesday afternoon." "Mom, I have incredible news. Mitchell Security Solutions just won a major federal contract, $2.3 million over 3 years. "Oh my goodness, Jessica. That's wonderful. Your father is going to be so proud." "Is he there? I'd love to tell him myself." "He's at the store, but I'll call him right now. This is such exciting news." I hung up, feeling like I was finally going to get the recognition from my father that I'd been seeking my entire life. A $2.3 million government contract wasn't something he could dismiss as playing with computers or a cute hobby. This was undeniable proof that Jessica Mitchell had built something substantial and important. 20 minutes later, as I was reviewing contract documents and planning our expansion, my phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was Dad. "Heard about your contract. Good for you. By the way, I've been thinking about the store situation. Your brother Ryan deserves this opportunity more than you. He needs a chance to prove himself and rebuild his reputation. Thanks for everything you've done, but Ryan should be the one getting recognition for turning things around." I read the message 3 times before the words fully registered. On the day I'd won the largest government contract ever awarded to a veteran-owned small business in Iowa, my father's response was to tell me that my gambling-addicted, embezzling brother deserved success more than I did. After I'd sacrificed everything to save Ryan from prison, after I'd built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, after I'd proven myself in combat, earned military decorations, and achieved something that most entrepreneurs only dream about, my father's immediate reaction was that Ryan deserved it more. I set the phone down on my desk and stared at it as if it were a live grenade. Around me, my employees were celebrating the biggest win in our company's history. Derek was on the phone with potential new hires. Our office buzzed with excitement and possibility, and I was sitting in the middle of it all, feeling like someone had just torn my heart out. The success I'd worked for, sacrificed for, and finally achieved meant nothing to the man's approval I'd been chasing my entire life. Even now, even with undeniable proof of my capabilities and achievements, Robert Mitchell still believed his son, who'd stolen from the family business and required his sister's financial rescue, deserved success more than his daughter.
But something was different this time. Something had shifted inside me during the 6 months since I drained my savings to save Ryan. For the first time in my life, my father's opinion didn't devastate me. It clarified something I'd been trying to understand for 28 years. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. Done seeking his approval. Done measuring my worth by his standards. Done letting his limited vision of my potential define how I saw myself. I picked up my phone and typed a response that took me 30 seconds to write and 28 years to find the courage to send. And what I wrote would change our relationship.
My response to Dad's text was simple, direct, and years in the making. Dad, I just won a $2.3 million federal contract, the largest ever awarded to a veteran-owned small business in Iowa. I built this company from nothing while you told me it wouldn't work. I served my country with distinction while you called it playing soldier. I sacrificed my life savings to keep Ryan out of prison while he stole from your business. If you think he deserves success more than me after all of that, then we have fundamentally different definitions of what deserving success means. I'm done seeking your approval. I hope someday you can be proud of what I've actually accomplished instead of wishing I were someone else. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came back within minutes. You've always been too proud for your own good, Jessica. Pride comes before a fall. I stared at that message for a long time, and then I did something I'd never done before in my entire relationship with my father. I laughed. Not with bitterness or anger, but with genuine relief. After 28 years, Robert Mitchell had finally shown me exactly who he was and what he thought of me. There was no ambiguity left, no room for hope that he might someday see my worth. And for the first time in my life, that was perfectly okay. Derek found me at my desk an hour later, still holding my phone and smiling. "You look like someone who just figured something out," he said. I did. I figured out that I don't need my father's approval to know I'm successful. I showed him the text exchange. Derek read it twice, then looked at me with concern. "How are you handling this? I know how much his opinion has always mattered to you." "That's just it," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "It doesn't matter to me anymore. For the first time in my life, I can see clearly who I am without filtering it through his expectations." Over the following weeks, as Mitchell Security Solutions prepared to begin our massive DHS contract, I found myself experiencing a kind of freedom I'd never felt before. Decisions that had once been complicated by worries about family approval became straightforward business choices. Energy that had been tied up in seeking validation was redirected toward building something extraordinary. Mom called several times, trying to mediate between Dad and me. She was heartbroken by the rift and couldn't understand why I wasn't trying harder to repair the relationship. "He's your father, Jessica. He loves you, even if he doesn't always show it the way you want it." To which I replied, "Mom, I'm not angry at Dad. I've just accepted that he's never going to see me the way I need him to. That's not his fault or mine. It's just who he is. But I'm not going to keep sacrificing my peace of mind trying to change something that isn't going to change." Ryan, surprisingly, reached out to me directly about a month after the text exchange. "Jess, I heard about the fight with Dad. I wanted you to know that I've never asked him to say that shit about me deserving success more than you." "I know you didn't, Ryan. This isn't about you." "Yeah, it is though, at least partly. I've been thinking about what you did for me. Bailing me out of jail, paying my restitution, probably saving me from prison. And I realized I never actually thanked you properly." I was quiet, waiting for him to continue. "I fucked up bad, real bad. And you saved me even though you had every reason not to. I know what that cost you, and I know Dad doesn't really get it, but I get it. And I'm going to pay you back every penny, even if it takes me 10 years. Ryan,
Focus on staying clean and building a life you can be proud of. The money will work itself out. That's just it, he said. I am building something. I took your advice about working for someone else's landscaping company first. I've been working for Henderson Landscaping for 6 months, learning the business side. And I'm saving money. Real money, not gambling it. I want to start my own company again, but do it right this time. I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride in my brother. Not the patronizing pride our parents had always shown for his minimal efforts, but genuine respect for someone doing the hard work of rebuilding their life. That sounds like a solid plan, Ryan. How can I help?
Colonel Williams invited me to speak at a Pentagon conference on innovative cybersecurity solutions. A group of female entrepreneurs asked me to mentor them through the challenges of starting technology companies. The Small Business Administration featured Mitchell Security Solutions as a case study in veteran-owned business success. Most importantly, I was genuinely happy. Not the performance of happiness I'd maintained while seeking my father's approval, but the deep satisfaction that comes from building a life aligned with your own values and capabilities. Derek and I were reviewing our second-year financial projections when he made an observation that stopped me cold. You know what's different about you now? What's that? You stopped asking if you deserve this success. You just accept that you've earned it. He was right. The little voice that had always whispered doubts about my worth, that had questioned whether my achievements were real or just lucky breaks, had gone quiet. I knew exactly what I'd built and what it had cost me to build it. A year after the text exchange that ended my relationship with my father's approval, I established the Mitchell Foundation, a scholarship and mentorship program for female veterans starting their own businesses. The foundation's first recipient was a Marine Corps veteran from Ohio who wanted to start a renewable energy consulting company but lacked startup capital. "This changes everything for me," she said during our first mentoring call. "Not just the money, but knowing that someone believes I can do this. I don't just believe you can do it, I know you can do it. The question is whether you believe it." As I hung up that call, I realized I'd found my purpose beyond just building a successful company. I was creating the support system I'd wished for during my own journey, the encouragement, resources, and validation that my family had been unable or unwilling to provide. My father and I speak perhaps 3 times a year now, usually through Mom or at family gatherings that become unavoidable. Our conversations are polite, but surface level. He asks about my business in the same tone he might ask about the weather. I answer briefly and change the subject. There's no animosity, but there's also no pretending that we have the relationship either of us might have wanted. Ryan has indeed started his own landscaping company, and it's thriving. He's been sober for 2 years, in a healthy relationship, and making steady payments towards repaying what I spent on his legal troubles. He sends me photos of projects his team has completed and updates about his business growth. I'm genuinely proud of him. Mom has adjusted to the new family dynamics better than I expected. She still wishes Dad and I were closer, but she stopped trying to force reconciliation. Instead, she's become one of my biggest supporters, bragging about my company's success to anyone who will listen. As I write this, Mitchell Security Solutions is preparing to bid on a $15 million contract that would establish us as one of the premier cybersecurity firms in the Midwest. We have 32 employees, offices in 3 cities, and a reputation that opens doors I could never have imagined when Derek and I started this journey. But the most important thing I've built isn't a company or a reputation or a financial portfolio. It's the unshakable knowledge that Jessica Mitchell is exactly who she was meant to be, regardless of who does or doesn't appreciate that truth. The approval I spent 28 years seeking from my father was never going to come, but it turns out I didn't need it anyway. The only approval that really matters is the kind you give yourself, and I finally learned how to do that. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you clearly that you don't need their permission to be extraordinary. That text from my father, the one that broke my heart on what should have been the best day of my professional life, turned out to be exactly what I needed to hear. Not because it was true, but because it was so obviously false that it finally freed me to see my own worth clearly. And that clarity changed everything.